Welcome back, spooky friends! Today's going to be the creation of the mayor from Nightmare Before Christmas. Here is a list of materials that you're going to be using in this tutorial. Duct tape, cardboard, marker, scissors, and rigid wrap. That's about it. Let's get started. First, you're going to want to cut out 6 pieces of cardboard that are roughly 1.5 feet. You could go shorter depending on the shoulder to head ratio that you've got going on. They're gonna be triangles with flat tops, and basically you're gonna tape them all together, as you can see here, to get the structure. Now, in this part of the video, I was working with only 5 pieces. When I fully constructed it, I realized that the front part of the face and the back part of the face were not even, because obviously I had 5 pieces. So if you're doing this process, don't use 5, use 6, because then you'll have a front part for the front of the face and a flat part for the back of the face too. So each piece needs to be taped together with duct tape. This is the inside of it. When you are done taping all the pieces together, as you can see here, you're going to connect the end pieces together, and it should look like a lamp shade, pretty much. That's the idea of what we're going for. You're creating your own lampshade. And you're gonna wanna put duct tape on all of the edges. So the top needs to be completely covered. The bottom, as you can see here, needs to be completely covered, because rigid wrap will be used with water and we don't want the edges to get messed up in any sort of way. This will also just help with the structure and make it a little bit more sturdy. So, I mean, you could cover the whole thing in duct tape if you really wanted to, but what we're focusing on is making sure the inside and the outside along all edges, as well as the top and the bottom, are completely covered. And this is where I draw the face on and realize I had fucked up. But it's okay, because I fixed it. I cut it down one of the seams, added another panel, as you can see here. So if you do the same thing that I did, you can certainly fix it before moving on to the rigid wrap stage. Once you get to that stage, you're not going to be able to fix it. There's no going back. So just make sure that you have the structure as sturdy and as big as possible, because you're not going to be able to edit it after that.
2,000 years later.
Now, I wanted to pop holes into the eyes. I drew on the eyes on where I thought I would, be able to see out of, and just used an X-Acto knife and popped them through. Moving on to rigid wrap. Now, this is the 8 by 10 inch plaster. I had a little bit left over from another bag that you can see here, me cutting up into strips. But basically they need to be about, you'll cut them, the bigger ones, in half twice, down the center lengthwise, and then at the end of this process I end up cutting them in half because they're just far too long, as you can see here. And I wanted to be able to do a few layers with the rigid wrap itself. We're going to use the same principle ideas that we used with the duct tape. First, you're going to go around the top edge and make sure that you cover up the rim of the mask. You're going to apply the same thing to the bottom before doing anything onto the center area, and this is just going to help with the structure. When putting the rigid wrap in the water, you want to squeeze out the excess, and then when applying it onto the cardboard, you're going to smooth it out with your hands as best as possible. Make sure that all the little dots that you can see are pretty much covered up by you rubbing the rigid wrap a little bit so that the flower moves around. And this will just give you more of an even seal and an even base for the mask. We will be going over it later with a sealer or Mod Podge, but you want to make sure it's as even and flat as possible, just so that you have less work on yours for this. But basically, that's it. This is probably the longest part of the process, and it's really important that you put something down underneath you before you get started, because rigid wrap is really, really messy. As you can see here, my desk is littered with the powder from the rigid wrap itself, as well as the water is getting everywhere when I take it out, the sheets out of the water. So I used old painter's paper, what you would put down if you were painting the walls. You could use towels, whatever you need to, but it's highly recommended because it's really messy. My pants are like Rorschach tests right now. They're completely covered. So wear some old clothes and get started. I found that going around in the circular motion was better than doing the strips up and down, but once it's completely covered with you wrapping them in the circular motion, one strip after another and going slightly down then the next one, at the very end, the leftover material that I had, I used on the sides where I knew that I was going to draw the face, just to get the most smooth. I went and put those vertical. So use the circular for the base of it, and then use the leftover pieces to go vertical so that you have one solid base. It doesn't matter too much, but it's important that you smooth it out and keep going with the smoothing. Otherwise, when you put the Mod Podge on it, it could tend to be uneven. So just get it as even as possible. Also notice from time to time, I'm going to dip my hand in the water and just use a little bit of the water to rub across the strips that have already been applied. And this just helps even out all of the material that the rigid wrap is made up of and help make things more smooth. Because the rigid wrap does tend to get a little dry quickly. It's okay to resaturate it, just don't add too much water or else the cardboard can get saggy underneath, and that's no bueno. Oh, I am box litter. Box litter. Stop! Oh, you get kind of idiot. Oh, did we put a box? Do we box? Thank you guys so much for watching. Part 2 is coming next week. We're going to be putting on finishing touches with the paint job. Before that happens, definitely make sure if you're making this yourself that you give it 24 hours to completely dry, and then do a few layers of Mod Podge or sealer so that it's sturdier. That always seems to help on all of my masks. I always put a couple layers of that on. After that, we'll be ready to paint, and we can make some awesome little decorations because the mayor has a spider tie as well as a big mayor badge and a really cool pointy hat, which will be coming to you next week. Stay tuned, stay spooky, like, comment, and subscribe. And as usual, stay spooky, friends.